right, so with that, let's do the old switcheroo here while we're doing it. All right, so for number 2, yeah, you can just swap it out. How many of you are undead right now? All right. How many of you? Actually, let's go back. So, how many of you have actually ever hunted before? I'm actually curious, seeing this as a Brooklyn audience. All right, a few of you. Were you successful in your huntings?
Yes.
All right. Did you have any ethical dilemmas or any moral conundrums while hunting? No. Yes. No. Okay. So apparently the few hunters here, they're all for it. They're like, we're hunting. Let's do this. We're not going to question the morality of this. So the question that will be raised and analyzed in the next 20 minutes will be, if something is already undead, like a zombie, for example, is it ethical to kill that? After all, it's already dead, but then you're still taking away the sort of afterlife of something that is already dead. So I think it's an interesting question worth examining. So in the long line of zombie talks here at Nerd Night, I think we start chapter 5 with giving a round of applause to Kyle.
Thanks, Matt. So, 3 books, and whose mind is already blown by the, yeah, and the exclamation point, right? I don't know how I can top that, but I'll do my best. Again, my name is Kyle MunKittrick, and I'm here to talk to you about ethics of the undead. So, what are we actually talking about? Well, what we're going to talk about tonight is it actually okay to kill zombies? And this was based on a series of articles I wrote for Discover Magazine. So there's a ton of stuff on this. I could go on for hours and hours, and I'm sure you'd all be wrapped in attention about it. But instead, we're just going to take 20 minutes, and we're going to look at a couple things as to how that works. Now, before we dive into it, again, I was going to use the clicker, and it's gone, so thanks. The kind of way we're going to be thinking about this is in the mindset of bioethics. And bioethics is a branch of philosophy that is part of applied ethics. So if you kind of whittle philosophy down. And bioethics deals with science, medicine, and technology. So we deal with simple things like surrogate pregnancy or fertility tests or animal testing. And then you can get more like complicated, interesting stuff like robot rights and immortality. Like we'll deal with all sorts of crazy ideas. But if you ever are curious, is something actually dealing with bioethics? There's a really simple rule of thumb. Is the question philosophical and super fucked up? Bioethicists tend to ask the most uncomfortable, weird questions. So like things you don't bring up to the dinner table, abortion, necrophilia, incest, these are sort of things we deal with. So the fucked up question we're going to ask ourselves tonight is it okay to kill a zombie? Now, this might seem pretty obvious at first, but what we're going to actually get into is a few different reasons why this question isn't as obvious as it may seem. We're going to talk about it in 3 ways. So the first thing we're going to do is actually define what is a zombie. Second, we've got a bunch of nerds out here. Everybody here has watched a movie or a TV show or played a video game and been like, no, that's not how zombies work. That's ridiculous. So we're going to do our best to define a realistic one. Then we're going to try and answer 2 questions. One, why is it okay to kill zombies? And then we're going to try and figure out when it's okay to kill zombies. Now again, there's a point to all of this. And at the end of it, we're actually going to try and figure out why it is we're all still so interested in zombies when they're just kind of this weird thing. Like, why are we constantly interested in it? So, first thing we need to do is define, well, what is a zombie? So tonight, what we're not going to talk about are fantastic zombies. So no demons, no magic. Sorry, we've got a picture of Ash earlier, so that should get you Army of Darkness fans happy. And we're not going to talk about magic, not even like the super mutant zombies. We're just going to focus on the most scientific ones possible. So what does that mean? Well, a couple things. So the first is, well, what's a scientific zombie, right? Well, the first thing that we want to talk about is how does the virus work? So if you've seen World War Z or 28 Days Later, you know that the moment that somebody gets infected, it's like 30 seconds later they're a zombie, which is insane and impossible. That would never ever happen. The fastest a virus could work is maybe 36 hours. So that's like super virulent. So that's the first thing. You get bit, it takes 36 hours. So you know you've got lots of pain and suffering coming the moment after you get bit. So then the other thing we want to look at are like, what are realistic ways that a zombie could happen? And I'm sure there have been Nerd Night talks on this, but there are two really obvious candidates. The first is rabies. So rabies is one of the craziest, weirdest viruses on the planet. There's a really good book called Rabid. If you want to learn more about it, read it. It's super bizarre. It's one of the only viruses that can travel up to the nervous system. That's why when you get bit, if you get bit down here, it takes a week, but if you get bit here, it takes a day to infect you. It's 100% fatal, and it does all sorts of crazy stuff. It attacks different parts of the brain and shuts down your motor functions, your ability to make good decisions, and on top of that, it makes you afraid of water, so nobody in here has rabies, which is really good news. The other interesting fact is one of the things that rabies can cause is something called priapism, which for those of you who are maybe language majors, you might know what this means. Priapism is when you can't stop ejaculating or orgasming. And it sounds fun at first, but it gets worse. So rabies is kind of our virus example of how a zombie can exist. The other side is something called cordyceps. And what cordyceps is a fungus that takes over bugs and it makes them go where the fungus can grow best. So whether that's atop of a plant so a bird can eat it, or in a warm, moist spot where it can grow, cordyceps hijacks animals and makes them move around. And so that's kind of the best example we can think of for like a rotting, like shuffling zombie. So we've kind of got our rage zombie with rabies and cordyceps with our shuffling zombie. And if you want to freak yourselves out, go online and start Googling pictures of cordyceps, because once it gets the bug where it wants it to be, it explodes out of them, and there's like tarantulas with antlers and all sorts of crazy shit that happens. So cordyceps is really, really bizarre. But that's kind of where we are in terms of what type of zombie. So let's actually ask the question, why is it okay to kill a zombie? Now this again may seem obvious. That thing is scary, he's a badass with an axe, the end of the story. But what's more important here is that we as people are really freaked out about anything that is human DNA. Whether it's a zygote, just at the moment of conception somebody's born, a toddler, regular person, old person, a dead body. We have all these super bizarre rules around what we're allowed to do with bodies. And so why is it okay for us? Like, why are we comfortable killing zombies when these things have more human-like features than just a dead body? So we're going to look at two things that kind of describe why we actually think it's okay to kill zombies. So the first one is something called personhood. And so what's interesting about this picture, right, is they're faking being zombies, and those are actual zombies, and it's working. And so the question is, like, why does this happen? And the idea behind personhood is that human beings have a whole bunch of traits that make us popular, well, not popular, I mean, it makes some people popular. But what's more important about personhood is it's like pornography. You know it when you see it. If something doesn't have personhood, you don't know. But the way it works is that personhood comes from the idea that, so you look at a cat, and a cat is alive, it's aware, it doesn't have emotions, but it reacts to things. It seeks food, and it has some sense of self-control, right? Maybe your cat knows how to use a litter box, maybe it doesn't, maybe it shits on your bed, I don't know. But a larger point is that there are these like basic functions it has. But then when you look at higher order human beings, they have some really complicated behaviors. And one of the most important ones that a higher order person has is this thing, it's like empathy, but it's like active empathy. So the core idea is, I recognize that everyone in this room is another person. And pretty much everyone in here does that as well. There might be some of you we don't know so much about. But the more important point is that when you have empathy, and that empathy is something you act on. So if you see somebody else in pain, and you don't just say, oh, I feel bad for you, you're in pain. but instead you actually go and you try and stop that. You try and do right by that person. That's kind of the core element of personhood, that you recognize that somebody else is in pain and has trouble, and you try and treat them correctly. Now, as we talk about how rabies might work, or how in this case like a rage zombie, so think of the 28 days later like sprinting after you, psychopath, jumping through glass, lunatic zombie. What's amazing is in that situation, the way these things have been portrayed on screen is they effectively have destroyed the frontal cortex, which is where you're able to make decisions around empathy, also where you're able to make forward-thinking decisions. So that's like, I'm going to take out a mortgage. That seems like a good idea. That's something a zombie can't do, because that part of its brain is just gone. And as it's going forward, and as it's doing all these crazy things, it's actually lost the ability to make the appropriate decisions. And so at that point, we no longer are obliged to treat that thing as a fellow person. It might be a human being. In fact, the thing that scares me the most about the 28 Days Later zombies, or the World War Z zombies, is that they aren't dead. And there's a good chance that they're memories. So your frontal cortex is like decisions and like reason. But the back of your brain, so like this part back here, is where a lot of your memories are stored, and also a lot of your emotions and your sensations. So what's creepy there is that there effectively might be a person watching behind the eyes of a rage zombie, unable to stop. So that in 28 days later, those things might know what they're doing. And we'll get more to why that's important later on. So just let that happy thought sit with you for a second. So we've got why kind of it's okay to kill rage zombies, but why is it okay to kill the rotting, dead, sort of cordyceps, fungus, shuffling bodies, right? So these things are already dead. They're a corpse. There's no brain there. There's no person there. Why is it okay? They're a body. They're dead. There's no problem here. Well, so as I mentioned, human beings are really kind of specific and touchy about what we do with bodies. Now, I made the necrophilia joke earlier, but there's a reason people are actually uncomfortable with it. Just go ahead and raise your hands if you're comfortable with corpse mutilation, necrophilia, mass graves. No? Nobody out there? So there's nervous laughter because this makes us all really super uncomfortable. And the reason is because human beings are obsessed with dignity around corpses. We're really, really careful about what we do with our dead. I mean, some people are even really careful what they do with their pets and all sorts of things like that. Like, there's a tremendous amount of respect around bodies. So why are we okay with mutilating corpses that are zombies? And the reason is because of this core concept of dignity. So if you think of, there's this guy called Immanuel Kant who came up with a whole lot of philosophy. Yeah, we got some applause for Immanuel Kant, big fan. He's at Madison Square this week. So, what Kant came up with, and he wrote these huge books, like just extremely thick and ridiculous. And so I'm not going to talk about all that. I'm going to talk about a very simple idea that he had, which is that people are ends unto themselves. That means that if I do something nice, this is a very simplified version, if I do something nice for you, that's it. I've achieved a moral good. Whereas if I try and use you to accomplish my own goals, I've done something wrong. What's crazy about that is if I try to use you to do something, and I don't lose any of your wealth, right? I don't take any money from you. I don't physically harm you. In fact, the only thing that happens to you is you just kind of feel bad afterwards. You know, you go to your friends, you're like, oh, he's a dick, he used me. That's a loss of dignity. And that's what makes it so interesting, is that no physical harm has to happen. It's totally social and totally based in our interpersonal relationships. And what's cool about that concept is it then translates onto the body. And there's actually just a core concept of dignity of the body. And Kant was uncomfortable with a lot of things, like masturbation, he thought, violated dignity of the body, and tattoos, and other things like that. But the core concept, like what we're trying to get at here, is that these bodies are being used by the virus or by the infection. And so it actually violates the dignity of the body to be infected. And so the great part about that is while corpse mutilation is a really horrible thing, putting a zombie into a wood chipper is actually restoring dignity to the body because you're preventing the virus from using that. So the next time you're watching your kills of the week for Walking Dead, just remember that Immanuel Kant would be really, really pleased to see that happen. So we're in really good shape. We figured out about personhood, so it's okay to kill rage zombies. We figured out about dignity, it's okay to kill the kind of corpse zombies. So let's get to the idea of when is it okay to kill a zombie. And to me, this is the most interesting part of any zombie movie. Because I've already checked out on the science, because every zombie movie gets it wrong. So you're just like, all right, I can't deal with this. So what makes it interesting? And why don't we also just watch like 4 hours of just like zombie gore effects? And the reason that we don't watch that is because we're also interested in how people react to these zombies. And so one of the great parts about every zombie movie, and this even happens in World War Z. And in World War Z, the movie, whether you loved it or hate it, there's 2 really cool scenes, both dealing with the moment somebody gets infected. In World War Z, it takes about 10 seconds from the moment you get bit to the moment you turn into a leaping, biting zombie. And in those 10 seconds, in both scenes in the movie, there's this really intense moment where the person's dealing with, oh my god, am I going to turn into a zombie? What does that mean? Now, in that 10 seconds, that's really boring. The type of zombies we're talking about, we're looking at like... Is everybody else getting that feedback, or you can hear okay? Okay. All right, if it's not that, I'll just talk louder. So the important thing is that, what do we do when we get bit? So the kind of zombie I described, this like translation from rabies into a kind of corpse zombie, right? So you get bitten, you go through about 36 hours of fever, and then you wake up and you're like a rage zombie, and you're sprinting around, biting, and attacking people. And then the disease does more and more damage, and you sort of turn into this shuffling zombie, and at some point, your brain shuts off and you're dead. And you're just like this fungus puppet that's just moving around as your like corpse shambles and like parts are falling off, and it's really horrible. And so in that process, like, when is it okay for you to kill that zombie? Because at the moment, right before you get bit, you know things are going downhill. Is then okay? Is it right after? Is it 12 hours in? Do you have to wait for the fever to start? Or maybe it's 36 hours in, right before you turn into a rage zombie? Or do you have to wait until you attack that person? Or do you have to wait until there's actual brain death and try and figure out when that is? Like, or is it just like the corpse zombie? Is that the only okay one? Like, we don't know. And to me, that's the most interesting thing that bioethics does. And we're on to this slide now, by the way. Stages of infection. What's crazy about it is, so bioethics tries to deal with this question every single day. And this is what everyone in this room actually likes about zombie movies, believe it or not, is the confrontation of the moment when somebody you care about gets bit or infected with this thing, and suddenly nobody knows what to do. And the reason they showed this scene in every single zombie movie is because there's no good answer. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer to the when is it okay to kill a zombie question. Twist end. What makes the zombie movies so interesting is that we are actually all confronted with this question every single day. So you might think, no, I don't know anyone who's been bit by a zombie. But what we do know, and if we add the concept of curing, things suddenly become a little bit more familiar. Everyone in this room has experienced a moment where they found out that somebody they knew was going to go through, usually a medical situation, that did not have a good outlook. And there were these moments when everything you read in the papers, everything you thought about sort of theoretically, you're like, oh, I know how I would deal with this situation. I know what it's going to be like for me. And then you're confronted with it, and you don't know what to do. And there's no good answer. And even the people and everyone tries to prepare. People write advanced directives, living wills, they sit down and talk with their family. They try and figure out what they want to do when something really horrible happens. But nobody knows what the fuck to do. And it's awful. And zombies, as crazy as this sounds, zombie movies actually let us confront this fear of an uncurable, horrible disease that we don't know anything to do about. And that is kind of what I think the ethics of the undead makes it really, really interesting. Is it gives us this really cool space to explore this idea that, fuck, we don't know what to do here. This is really scary. But let's talk about it. Now I know that was kind of a downer moment, so I've got some good news for you. That zombies aren't real. If anyone was freaking out, you can relax. The other good news I have for you is if they were real, if it's be A, okay to kill them, and B, the zombie apocalypse probably wouldn't happen. There's been a bunch of studies, there's no way that virus would spread quickly enough. The other thing, if you want to read a really cool article, just Google zombies versus animals. There's a really cool article just written about how basically vultures, cockroaches, and jaguars, believe it or not, would be just totally destroying zombies. So, you know, they'd be like a walking smorgasbord. So don't worry, we'd be fine. So there's nothing to actually worry about. So what the hell am I doing up here? Why am I talking about all this? So the reason to me that this is so interesting is that we live in an era of really advanced medical technology, and that I've actually got friends in the audience who were in bioethics courses with me, things like that, who know about how ridiculous these questions are. That there are, at this point, probably over 1 million people in the US who do nothing but study these questions, and nobody has, not the zombie ones, I mean the medical ones. And nobody has any good answers. We try to come up with stuff, but really everyone in this room knows that, shit, I might get this horrible disease, or I might get something that we can't cure, or if we can cure it, I might come out the other end and be totally fucked up. To bring rabies back, it's 100% fatality rate, except for 3 people. And the 3 people who survived all had some sort of like motor impairment, loss of like memory, like all sorts of crazy shit. If you get rabies, get vaccinated like immediately. It's really bad. But the more important part is that zombies let us think about these big, scary issues in a really fun, controlled way. That, okay, here's this awful thing that can happen. Instead of worrying about it or freaking out, I'm going to watch this guy run a tank over 500 or 600 zombies. I'm going to feel better about the situation. It's a way for us to explore these bigger ideas, and also to come to terms with the fact that sometimes we have to deal with being humans who are losing our humanity, and that we're surrounded by that experience. And so, kind of in conclusions, the reason that the ethics of the undead matter is that they give us this space to explore these really scary, weird ideas in a context that also allows us to have fun, to see the wilder, kind of crazier ways that people deal with it. And to top it all off, I mean, attaching a chainsaw to your hand and just going wild is pretty wonderful. So, with that, if you met somebody nice during your speed dating tonight, go home, pick your favorite zombie movie, and get a little philosophical. Thank you.
All right, so I'll ask the first obvious question. In those 10 seconds between getting bitten and being zombified, do you have a strong opinion on what you would do if you were in that situation? Or I guess if you were the one watching your loved one being
So it was yelled out in the audience. In the movie World War Z, they actually run the ledge of a building, because in the movie they just start spasming and freaking out, so you just fall off the edge. To end on a happy note, I think I would probably want somebody to put me down at that point. So.
Questions? on the happy note, right there.
In your expert opinion, what would be the most ethical way to kill a zombie and the most unethical way to kill a zombie?
In his expert opinion, what would be the most ethical and unethical method of killing a zombie?
I'll start with unethical first. I think the most unethical, so in the version I laid out, would be like somebody gets bit and you're like, I'm sorry man, that's just putting them down right away, and that person's like, no, I don't want it. Too late, sorry. You gotta talk to them, ask them a question, get their opinion. And they might be under stress, so you wanna maybe give them a beer, relax them. But the most ethical way, if you have a chance to talk to that person, is to be like, okay, what do you think, what do you wanna do, when do you wanna do this, get their opinion, talk it through with that person. I think my favorite part about zombie movies are the ones where there's the real conversation, and the two people are like, well, this just happened, all right. What do you want to do now? And in movies like Shaun of the Dead, where things are a little bit more goofy, and he keeps him around as a friend, there's almost this moment of like recovery and goodness. So I think the most ethical way would just be to look at the situation realistically, and to make sure that the person, either yourself or that you care about, is not experiencing a lot of suffering, and that's the end goal. Once that person is turned into a zombie, the most ethical way to do it is with a blunt object that creates a large sort of graphic display. I think that's right there.
Sounds like the most artistic of these. Right. If Jackson Pollock was around, we would know how to do it. Any questions from the balcony? You're all seated. All right, round of applause. Round of applause. Okay, we are 3/4 of the way through the evening. I'll take another 1.5